Hey everyone, great to be with you here on almost the last day of session. We're getting close, so happy to take your questions.
Speaker Sprowls, I wanted to ask about the children's hearing aid program that got put in the budget.
Yeah.
$5 million a year, 4 times what was agreed to. 2 questions. 1, how did that number come up? And 2, a bill died that would have required insurance companies to mandate that coverage.
Yeah.
Why is it better for taxpayers to pay for those hearing aids than?
I think the issue is we've historically not done insurance mandates in the Florida House. We don't usually think it's good for the market. However, we do lots of investments that we think are good for kids. One of those this year was the hearing aid that you talked about. I will tell you that Representative Brannon, I don't know if any of you got to see his testimony. He's got a personal story with his son. Him and Representative Zika spent a lot of time this session talking about that issue and just candidly won our hearts, and we wanted to help, and we thought this was a good way to do it.
There's something in the budget that was just released in a conforming bill that speaks to universities not being eligible for performance funding if they violate individual freedom standards.
Yeah.
What is that exactly? What's that for?
It just says that House Bill 7, which is the individual freedom bill, that they have to comply with the bill, which they should because it's the law, in order to be eligible for performance funding.
So it doesn't have anything to do with the diversity study from last year?
It has to do with what we pass for individual freedoms and making sure that they're complying with it. And this is not something that's inconsistent with what we've done on other things, making sure whether it's state agencies or the universities that they're complying adequately with the laws we pass. If there's no penalty for noncompliance, then people don't comply.
As I'm sure you're aware, you heard the debate about the bills dealing with critical race theory and parental rights and things like that. And you've heard the debate that came from the Democrats who said that you all are really doing this to help DeSantis in 24 and to pander to your base. But I want to ask what you think that you've accomplished with all these bills. I mean, this is really, you usually don't do these many types of bills all in one fell swoop, and I wanted to...
Yeah, well, I've only been speaker for 2 years, and candidly, we did this last year. If you go back to the budget conference last year in Proviso, you will find language specifically dealing with the individual freedom type issues. At that point, we couldn't reach an agreement during the budget process, so we came back with a full bill this year. Part of the criticism last year when we tried to do it was, we haven't had this whole conversation in committee, it hasn't gone through all the process, so this year, a bill was filed. It went through the process. We believe that people should be treated equally, regardless of their race or their gender. I think it's a pretty widely accepted concept. I've challenged folks to point to a line in the bill that they have an objection with. So we think it's great policy, and we wanted to pursue it. We wanted to pursue it last year, well before there was any, pointing to the governor or things that he was talking about.
But do you think there's a specific message that you're trying to send to Floridians, to voters with everything?
100% we're trying to send a message. Treat people equally. Don't tell people that they're bad because of their race. Don't tell people they're bad because of their gender. Don't blame people for the sins of other people. So I think it's a pretty reasonable thing, Gary, and that is the message we are trying to send.
Can I just follow up on that? That those are really good things for a parent to tell their children. Do you think that is the role of government, to be telling people when it comes to speech, that is the kind of, you're trying to restrict?
Mary Ellen, I couldn't agree more that it is the department of a parent to teach their kids about that. So right. In fact, the bills that we pass are specifically to do exactly what you just said, which is to make sure that we're putting parents in the driver's seat. So while, Mary Ellen, people want to sit around and talk to their kids and teach them all kinds of different things on how they view the world or how they view their religion or their faith, that is totally up to them. What we don't want is a student walking into a classroom and being told that because of the color of their skin, they have to feel a certain way, or they're to blame simply because of the color of their skin or their gender. We are specifically doing exactly what you're saying, which is taking the government out of it. If parents want to have that conversation with their kids, of course, they're welcome to.
But you're making it a law. Isn't that exactly?
We're putting the law on
government in it?
No, ma'am. We're putting the law on government. If we passed a law that says parents, you can't do this, which I think would be, unconstitutional. What we're doing is putting a limit on government. What can government do? So I guess you have to ask yourself a philosophical question. When you drop your kids off in the morning, like I do, and they go into school, do my rights end as a parent? Have I ceded all of my authority to the school district so that they could teach our kids whatever they want, whenever they want? And I think the conversation that you've seen us have in the House this year is we don't believe that. We don't believe when the kids walk into the classroom that school districts should be able to do whatever they want. We believe that parents should be in the driver's seat.
I have education bill was passed last night that deals with college accreditation and a potential review or for tenured faculty. What's the message to the university system in terms of the new rules that are now in place for potentially tenured faculty and universities and how they get reviewed for their standards?
I think it's how we want to keep universities accountable. I mean, on the accreditation language, gosh, I've been here 8 years, and I have heard every excuse in the book from higher ed institutions, and they always use the same thing. Well, we can't do that because of SACs. And I can tell you there's been times where we've called their bluff, and magically, problem was solved. I think that we're getting a little tired of whether it's university administrators hiding behind the shield of an accreditor and letting them sort of do their dirty work. We're tired of the accreditors necessarily trying to dictate how we do things in Florida. So it's very simple. We say that when you have an incumbent accreditor, when the renewal happens, go with another accreditor. And this is, as you guys may remember, a number of years ago, it was all regional accreditors. It was a monopoly. Under the Trump administration, they kind of broke that all up and allowed for other accreditors, more of a free market. So I think you're going to see other states who are going to go in a similar direction.
Can you give us an example of where a university president pointed to them and on something?
I won't, because it was a personal conversation, and I wouldn't repeat the conversation. I can tell you that it's been directly with me on issues where we've passed a law that the meaning of the law is plain as day, and I've been told, well, we can't comply. And imagine that. We can't comply with Florida law because an accreditor, an out-of-state accreditor, is telling us that we can't. That's not how the way this works. We believe, listen, let's inject some market into this. Get incumbent accreditor, get a new accreditor. If you want to go back to the old one afterwards, you can do that when you come up for renewal. But we're not going to be locked in to a monopoly of an accreditor in higher education.
You can't point to the president. What about the example of the law? Even the
Well, that would give away the president, I think.
Can you talk about the conforming bills? There was a lot of debate and talk over 2508. I'm told that was something that actually stalled the ultimate resolution of the budget. I don't know if that's true or not.
It's totally untrue.
It's not true. Okay. So the way we've got it now is that there's this provision that says that if the South Florida Water Management District passes a rule, it has to get ratified, and this is as it relates to water access, especially during a drought. It has to get ratified by the legislature. The big unknown here is what happens if you modify the rule and it gets vetoed by the governor. Does that set the process? Could that potentially delay?
Yeah, I understand the question.
Everything?
I think that the Senate's made some modifications to the bill, so I'd point you to the modifications. But the other thing I would say is this is also not unusual. You all know that when certain agencies make a rule ratification that has a $1 million plus fiscal, that's something that requires ratification by the legislature. So I think it was the President and the Senate's intention to bring the same level of accountability.
Two more questions. Can you talk a little bit about your thoughts on
the...
I'm sorry, John, start over.
Have you looked ahead to congressional redistricting and what your next...
We have not. As you know, we passed the bill off the floor. We're bringing in the budget for a landing. So to answer your question, we're not doing that right now.
What
do you see the fate of the condo inspections? Is that going to come up tomorrow, and you're going to take what the Senate is offering?
Can't take away all the fun, guys. Otherwise, you won't come tomorrow.
The campaign finance.
You're getting like fine out.
The campaign finance.
I think Romy had a question about.
This seems to be a landmark year for USF's budget,
Yeah.
and I know it's been a big passion of yours while you've been here in office. What do you think of their transformation really during your time here, and do you have any concerns about their ability to secure funding if you're out of office?
No, I don't. I mean, obviously they have to come up and make the case, but look, actions speak louder than words. They're the fastest rising university in America by rankings. They're doing a great job. I think they're top 15 in the world in patents. They're doing great work in research. We've done a lot of work in the legislature, not just me, but members of the Tampa Bay delegation a number of years ago. It seems very boring, but it was very important to USF about consolidated accreditation for those universities, which I think allow them to kind of fight as a team. And I think they're going to start to rise that way.
What are your
Back to
thoughts on the
board
sheriff's
campaign
amendment?
finance bill, and I'm just curious that got held up in court this past year. I'm just curious, why do you think the changes that you made to this year are going to stand court most?
Yeah, I'd point you to the bill sponsor on that one.
What are your thoughts on the sheriff's amendment? I think it was the law enforcement recruitment bill.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts that they're I think my understanding of it is that they could switch money around.
Yeah, I think the issue is they got, two budgets, for lack of a better explanation. One is for, operation salaries, et cetera. The other one is for tangible things like cars. So the question is, if they decide, I've got this money for a car, but what I really need is a deputy, or vice versa, should they be able to do it, or do they have to go back to the county commission to say, I want to buy a car? So I think from our perspective, we trust the sheriffs. If we're going to entrust them to patrol our streets, show up for us when we call 911, I think they can make the decision on their budget.
I have a general question about this session, and specifically about the parental rights and education bill, Don't Say Gay, and the critical race theory bill. And it caused a lot of angst among lawmakers of color and gay lawmakers in both chambers this year. And neither of those bills was this actually an issue, that it had been a problem that was being solved in Florida. And I'm wondering, was that legislation really worth it, considering all of the angst and national attention?
Well, I'd say a couple of things.
Yeah.
Number one, and I say this respectfully, and I've said this before, I believe the vast majority of the angst was created by misreporting, by mischaracterizing, by headlines that are good for clickbait but have nothing to do with the 4-page bill that we actually put out. So did it create angst in the public? For sure. When I was talking about in the White House press room and things like that. But the reality is none of that is a reflection of fact. Right? So the real question I would kind of have back is, why is that the case? Why is it that people aren't reporting about what's actually in the bill? And then if they disagree, having the conversation on the editorial page or on TV about what's actually in the bill. So did it create angst? Yes. Do I think it was sort of manufactured angst by the media that people, reacted to, right? Because look, you all here, you are reading the bills. It's our job to read the bills. It's our job to know what's in the bills. But look, people are working. They're trying to put their kids through school. We can't expect them to see an article on Twitter or on the Tampa Bay Times and go to the myfloridahouse.gov website and pull up the bill and read it for themselves. They're counting on you all to tell them what's in the bill. So I think that was really the issue there.
But I'm talking about the lawmakers themselves. They read the bills.
Yeah.
The lawmakers read the bills.
Yeah.
They did it in both chambers.
Guys, here's the thing. You do this all the time. You do this all the time. Not you. This is the royal you.
All right.
You say, well, it's caused angst. Yes, but they're the same talking points that are on Twitter. They're the same talking points that are being reported. Guys, you've read this bill. You've read this bill. Mm-hmm. You know none of that is in the bill. And yet, the reporting hasn't changed. I think there was one, it might have been Evan Donovan in Channel 8 in Tampa Bay, who did, I think, a really good job, to his credit, of putting it out there and actually saying, this is what is in the bill. He put up a graphic and everything. And look, if people want to be outraged once they have the information, great. But what have I experienced has been the complete opposite. When people are actually told, this is what in the bill, their demeanor changes and they go, well, I don't understand what the big deal is. It's like, well, neither do we.
Well, there is the angst question is, among many people, is that it's not just what you say in black and white. It's what it is, the message you're conveying. And there is this idea that teachers are going to be afraid because you've got the parental bill, you've got the parental cause of action.
And Mary Ellen, and again,
that is what we're reporting on.
Yeah,
We're not making it up.
No, that's not true. I'm going to push back on that. This is an individual, the Miami Herald, but I would say the media as a whole on this bill has totally misreported the facts. So when you say, well, gosh, it's created angst, you'll have to own some of that angst. You got to own the angst. And because the reality is they think that and feel that way because of what they read, not what is in the bill. So, when you say that, it's like, well, if I create the fire and then I put it out, do I get credit? No. You created the fire, being the press, on that bill by misreporting it.
One more question, guys.
But Republicans have had a history of themselves of characterizing legislation and initiatives by their opponents and putting names on them and attaching messaging points. And
have I done that, Gary, that you want to point out?
I would say that this. I would say.
Fair enough, John. Fair enough.
But we can go all the way back to taxes in Florida that were called and death taxes and seniors and savers tax. There's names that both sides use all the time to try to win the messaging war. And so maybe the issue were you sort of taken aback by the fact that maybe the opponents of the bill, because they were the ones who came up with the words "Don't Say Gay."
Look, it was. If you're trying to vilify the bill, right?
I'm not trying to.
No, not you. The advocates. You guys are taking this very personally today. Very personal today. If the advocates are trying to vilify the bill, it's great branding. Not blaming the advocates for doing what advocates do, which is to try to paint something as nefarious. What I'm saying is that we all have the responsibility of actually knowing what the facts are and making those decisions. And what we get back is, well, you're creating this feeling. No, we're not. That's not the bill. That's not what the bill sponsor said. Joe Harding, who got on the floor, I thought he did an excellent job. I thought he was an incredibly compassionate person. He was talking about how we care and love all children. I think he did an amazing job. So nobody would see what he said, nobody would see what he wrote and think that we were doing anything nefarious. But when you don't see those things and you don't actually read the law and all you get is the Twitter click, then you're going to be misled. All right, thank you all. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Speaker.